Goeiemorgen, good morning, dumela, guten morgen, privet. How to make a magic ring, also known as a magic circle, and also two alternatives in case you don't want to use the magic ring. Magic ring is useful for granny squares, clothes like hats, bed socks. It is also usually the start of all amigurumi projects, as well as many kind of flat and smaller motifs like a circle or various flowers, hearts, crosses, stars. There are so many small motifs that are started off with a magic circle. Please note that I tend to use the UK terms when I talk about crochet, but when I remember, I'll try to mention some others. There are many ways, and some of them seem to me rather complicated, of making a magic ring. I will basically show you two ways to make the magic ring. The purpose of a magic circle is simply to have a circle of yarn where you can work your crochet stitches into, but also be able to tighten the circle when you're done working. So you can have a big circle, clearly work your stitches into the circle, but make sure that the tail end is off to the one side so that as you're done working, you can tighten the circle. So it is just a circlet of yarn, insert the hook in there, make a slip stitch to secure the circle, and that is really what the magic ring is all about. So to start off with, make a loop, ensure the loose yarn end is in the direction that you're working, grab your yarn and start making stitches. As you are working, this extra yarn tail will grow shorter. Pull it tight, it will decrease the circle, but it will also make sure that there is still some of it left to grab later on. And then keep on working. And you can see there's still a big circle to work into. Having finished with the last stitch, you can pull that circle as tight as you need to. For some patterns there needs to be a bit of a gap in the middle, but for this one I don't want any gap. So you can pull it as tight as you can. That is the basic architecture of a magic ring. It is a circle of yarn with the working end of the yarn and the loose end of the yarn being able to be pulled away. Therefore, when I make it, just make a circle, hold it tight, grab my yarn, hold open the circle, make one chain stitch to secure it so that it stays in a circle, and then I start working. One alternative way to do this is to grab the short end, the yarn end, between your thumb and forefinger, wrap it across two fingers, around the back, and across two fingers again, forming an X, and then use these other fingers to temporarily hold that yarn in place so it doesn't fall over. So what you have in the back is just the place where it's crossed and the loose yarn end, and in front you have the X formed by the yarn going crosswise. So if you take the hook and go underneath this one, across that one, pull it out and twist it, then make a chain stitch, you will have exactly the same effect. There is your working yarn, there's the circle, and there is the yarn end that you can pull tighter as you work over both yarn ends. You can pull this yarn end tight. Okay, let me try to do that one more time. Hold the yarn with the loose end dangling between your thumb and forefinger. Twist it over those two fingers, bring it from the back around, making an X across your fingers. Now hold that end of the yarn with your other fingers, hook underneath the first strand, grabs the second strand, pulling the working yarn around, and twist as you bring your hook up, and then you can make a chain stitch directly from there to secure the loop. So you now have a loop with a loose yarn end, a working yarn on the other side, and you can start making stitches. The advantage of the magic ring is that you can pull this completely tight. You have absolute control, and you can also make it bigger if you need to get more stitches in here. You have control about the size of the ring. In case you don't like to make the magic ring, here is an alternative to it. One alternative is a chain ring. To do that, secure the yarn to your hook. I make a slip knot and then chain 4, 2, 3, 4. There's the chain 4. Insert the hook into the first chain and slip stitch it together. This might be a bit hard to see on camera, but in effect you now have a little ring of chain stitches which is secured together. So you still have a ring, and you have a loose yarn end and then the working yarn. So I replace my hook, you then insert the hook in the middle of this ring of stitches and work the stitches over the entire chain as well as the loose yarn end. Work some stitches. I'll be making a few UK treble crochets, that is US double crochet or long binky. Always making sure to work not only over these chain stitches but also to work over the yarn end. I think that should be enough to show. So here you can see that there is a gap in the middle of this ring, but because we've worked over this loose yarn end all the time, you can pull this yarn end tight and it will close the gap. The disadvantage of this over the magic ring is in every chain stitch there are 3 strands of yarn plus the loose working yarn, so you have worked in total over 4 strands of yarn, but it does make a little puffy in the middle because the stitches are now worked over 4 other strands of yarn, whereas with a magic ring it's only worked over 2 and does not have so much puff in the middle. But this would only be a bother if there is a really specific reason for your project to lay flat. For most things this would hardly be noticeable. The other way of doing this is secure the yarn to the hook. Make sure this loop on the hook is rather loose, and then make a slip stitch. We will again work some, did I say slip stitch? Work a chain stitch. We will again make some extra chains so that we can make trebles. So there's the 3 chains for the turning chain, and then you work your stitches directly into that first chain. All the stitches work directly into the first chain. This makes the chain the circle in which you work. The disadvantages of that is that chain can only be the one size. You can't make it smaller, you can't make it larger after you've worked into it. If you have a lot of stitches to work into it, then you would have to make a very loose chain and you cannot tighten it afterwards. The other reason I do not like this method as much is where you are working now, you are putting a lot of strain on that one strand of yarn. So this whole beginning of your project hinges over one strand of yarn, which is a strand that is taking strain because it's being stretched with all the stitches worked into it. And afterwards, as you can see here, you can do nothing about the size of that hole. It will be what it is. However, there are still some projects where this could be a useful alternative. And one of the reasons being, because it is worked across only one strand of yarn, there is none of the puffiness. Oops. So this method, where you use a chain stitch as the ring into which all the other stitches are worked, gives a flatter surface, but the size of the hole is not adjustable and you are putting a lot of strain on the one strand. Whereas making a ring of chain stitches and then working over the beginning yarn end will give you an adjustable size of the ring, just as with a magic ring, and you are working over multiple strands, so it is much stronger, but it does leave a little puffiness. Or you could just make the magic ring. I hope this was useful. See you next time. Have fun crafting.